Millions spent on engineering, revolutionary designs that promised to transform farming forever. Yet they disappeared from fields across America. The agricultural industry is littered with groundbreaking machines that ended up collecting dust or scrapped for parts. From billion-dollar bankruptcies to catastrophic design flaws, transmission failures that destroyed reputations, and corporate mismanagement that killed innovation, these 10 farm machines had everything going for them. Except one critical thing. They all failed spectacularly. Number 1. The John Deere 80110. In 1960, John Deere wanted to make a statement. They introduced the 8010, a massive four-wheel drive articulated tractor that was supposed to be the flagship of their revolutionary new generation of tractors. With 215 horsepower from a Detroit diesel 671E engine and weighing nearly 20 tons distributed on a 120-inch wheelbase, this beast was designed to dominate the largest farms in North America. But there was a problem, a big problem. The transmission couldn't handle the power. Farmers reported catastrophic failures in the field. The 8-train was so unreliable that John Deere made an unprecedented decision. They recalled every single unit. All 100 8-tray 10 tractors that had been sold were brought back to the Waterloo plant and completely rebuilt into the new 8-tray model with an entirely new transmission. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was financially devastating. According to forum discussions among tractor enthusiasts, the 80110 program almost broke Deere & Company. The cost of designing, engineering, manufacturing, recalling, and rebuilding these tractors in the late 1950s and early 1960s put enormous strain on the company's finances. Today, only 2 80110 tractors survived the recall. One was used at the John Deere factory with massive forklift prongs to move other tractors around the shipping yard. The other was lost at a shop that went bankrupt and was mistakenly sold as an asset of that shop before Deere could retrieve it. The 80110's failure taught John Deere a harsh lesson about rushing products to market. When they finally got it right with the 820, and later with the 7020 in 1971, they dominated the four-wheel drive market. But the 801 remains one of the most spectacular product failures in agricultural equipment history. Number 2. The Fordson Model F. Wait, how did a massively successful tractor make this list? Because while the Fordson didn't fail commercially, it failed the industry by being too successful with an inferior product. Introduced in 1917, the Fordson Model F became the first truly mass-produced affordable tractor. Henry Ford applied the same assembly line principles he used for the Model T automobile. From 1917 to 1928, over 755,000 Fordson F tractors rolled off the assembly lines. But here's the problem, it was terrible. The Fordson had a wooden coil ignition system that constantly failed. It lacked power compared to competitors. It was rough riding and uncomfortable. The most dangerous flaw was its tendency to flip over backward when pulling implements that became stuck, killing numerous operators. Government tests showed that while farmers spent 95 cents per acre plowing with a Fordson, it only worked because it was cheaper than feeding 8 horses. Many farmers who bought Fordsons specifically because of the low price later expressed severe buyer's remorse. So what made it a failure? By being cheap but inferior, the Fordson bankrupted companies that had better tractors. Innovative manufacturers like Silver King, Grey Drum Drive, Square Turn, and Hackney Auto Plow went out of business because they couldn't compete on price. The Fordson killed innovation in tractor design for years because manufacturers were forced to copy its cheap utilitarian design instead of pursuing better engineering. As one tractor historian wrote, the Fordson led the way in practical design, but it destroyed some amazing competitors and phased out innovative designs. The agricultural equipment world lost a decade of potential innovation because mediocrity was more affordable than excellence. Number 3. International Harvester Farmall Fast Hitch. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Harry Ferguson's 3-point hitch was revolutionizing tractor implement attachment. Featured on Ford Ferguson tractors, it was simple, effective, and becoming the industry standard. International Harvester decided they could do better. They introduced the fast hitch system, first offered as an option on the Super C in the early 1950s, and later on the 100, 200, 300, and 400 series tractors. The fast hitch worked well. It was quick to attach and detach implements. Farmers who used it generally liked it, but IH made a critical mistake. They created 3 incompatible variants. The 100 series used a single prong design. The 200 series used 2 small prongs. The 300 and 400 series used 2 large prongs. Even within the same brand, you couldn't swap implements between tractor models without adapters. Meanwhile, Ferguson's 3-point hitch was being standardized and adopted by every other manufacturer. John Deere, Massey Ferguson, Allis-Chalmers, Case, they all went with the 3-point system. By the 1960s, IH admitted defeat. They discontinued the fast hitch entirely and started offering 3-point hitches on their tractors. Today, conversion kits are available to add 3-point hitches to tractors that originally had fast hitch systems, because finding fast hitch implements is nearly impossible. The fast hitch was a good system that failed because International Harvester tried to go it alone instead of adopting the industry standard. It's a classic case of the second best technology can still lose if it's incompatible with everything else. Number 4. Massey Ferguson TX900 Series Rotary Combine. In the late 1970s, Massey Ferguson began developing what could have been their greatest achievement, the TX900 Series Rotary Combine. Initially, the plan included 3 models, the TX901, TX902, and TX903, with the TX903 featuring a 27-inch rotor designed to replace the conventional 750 model. Engineers spent years developing innovative features, including a load-sensing hydraulic system for the threshing rotor that would automatically maintain the correct concave setting to prevent plugging. This was cutting-edge technology for the time, but the TX903 and TX904 had a fatal flaw. They were prone to an unacceptable fore and aft pitching problem. Despite significant design changes, the engineers couldn't fix it. Then came the financial crisis of the 1980s. The worldwide recession, record high interest rates, and low commodity prices devastated farm equipment manufacturers. Many executives at Massey Ferguson failed to recognize that farmers were now buying fewer but larger machines. In 1985, Massey Ferguson reorganized and sold off its combine business, creating an independent company called Massey Combines Corporation. The TX900 rotary program was terminated without a single production unit ever being built. Instead, MF ended up buying the rotary combine technology from the bankrupt White Farm Equipment in 1985. The WFE 9720 became the MF 9720, then the Massey 8590, and eventually evolved into the 8560 and 8570 models. Massey Combines Corporation itself fell into bankruptcy in 1988, owing about $290 million and laying off 2,500 workers. The Brantford, Ontario plant that had been state-of-the-art when it opened in 1964 closed its doors in 1988 after just 24 years of operation. The TX900 represented years of research and millions of dollars that never saw a single harvest. All that remains are photographs and documentation in archives, a reminder of what could have been if the economy and engineering had aligned. Number 5. International Harvester Torque Amplifier. The torque amplifier, introduced on tractors like the Farmall Super MTA in the early 1950s, was genuinely innovative. It gave farmers the ability to shift between 2 ranges without clutching or stopping the tractor. For fieldwork, this was revolutionary. You could slow down for rough patches and speed up for easier ground without breaking your rhythm. When it worked, farmers loved it. The TA was offered on the standard utility and industrial tractor lines, as well as the Farmalls. It was popular enough that IH continued offering it for years, but reliability was a constant issue. The TA system added complexity and multiple points of failure. Hydraulic problems plagued the system. Dealers often commented that more testing should have been done on farms before release. There were too many infield failures. The TA issues contributed to a broader problem at International Harvester. In the 1960s and 1970s, IH rushed equipment to market that wasn't properly tested. The 816 mower conditioner, the Farmall 560's final drive, these failures cost IH customers permanently. Some farmers who suffered downtime from these mistakes never bought IH again. One retired IH regional manager summed it up in 2018. "I would put the reason why IH failed in just 2 words: horrible management." The torque amplifier was just one example of good ideas executed poorly because management prioritized sales over reliability. By the time IH's agricultural division was sold to Tenneco in 1984 and merged with Case to become Case IH, the damage was done. The TA concept was eventually perfected by other manufacturers, but IH's execution had tarnished their reputation. Number 6. New Holland TR70. In 1975, New Holland introduced the TR70, part of their revolutionary twin-rotor combine line. It was the first production twin-rotor combine in the industry, beating competitors to market. With its innovative design featuring 2 parallel rotors for threshing and separation, it promised superior grain quality and capacity. The concept was brilliant, but the execution? Not so much. The TR70 was plagued with problems from day one. Users reported that the double fork-style rotor drive was terrible, constantly bending the upper fork and causing loss of belt tension that would burn belts. The radiator air intake screen permitted chaff and dust entry, causing radiator plugging and engine overheating until an optional air stack extension fixed it. The engine air filter pre-cleaner also plugged frequently. Perhaps worst of all, the entire machine was lightly built. Shafts, pulleys, and bearings wore so quickly that nothing stayed aligned. One farmer who owned a well-maintained TR70 reported that after 1,800 hours it was nothing but trouble, breaking down daily. "Everything is lightly built," he wrote. "I would take a 5,000-hour IH-1440 over a 2,000-hour TR70 any day." Another owner reported their TR70 was completely worn out at 2,000 hours despite top-notch maintenance. Metal was fatigued. Bearings constantly needed replacement. The variable speed and transmission clutch were nightmares. Major and expensive shafts needed replacing. Even the axle housings broke. The Ford-powered versions didn't have enough power, and when farmers upgraded to Cat engines, the lightly built machine couldn't handle the extra power without accelerated wear. New Holland learned from these mistakes. The TR75, TR85, TR86 and later models progressively improved reliability. Each generation was better than the last, but the TR70's reputation was so poor that many farmers today specifically warn against buying one. "I would not want a TR70 back at any price," one veteran combine operator stated. Number 7. Allis-Chalmers Gleaners. The Gleaner Manufacturing Company created high-quality self-propelled combines starting in 1923. When Allis-Chalmers acquired Gleaner in 1955, it represented a major strategic win. Allis was the market leader in pull-type combines with its all-crop harvester line, and acquiring Gleaner meant they would also lead in self-propelled machines. For several years, Gleaner's profits made up nearly all of Allis-Chalmers' profit. The combines were excellent machines, popular especially in the Midwestern United States. But in 1985, everything changed. Allis-Chalmers sold their farm machinery manufacturing business to Deutz AG, becoming Deutz Allis. There was a problem American farmers hadn't anticipated. Many World War II veterans were fiercely loyal to American-built machinery and distrusted anything with German connections. One Deutz Allis Gleaner combine was nicknamed the Kraut Can by import-wary farmers despite being manufactured in the United States. Sales plummeted. Deutz made significant investments, spending about $8 million on capital improvements at the Independence, Missouri plant. They drastically reduced the dealer network from 1,800 dealers to just 800, and slashed the U.S. workforce from over 1,800 to just 900. Despite reducing losses from $82 million in 1987 to just $1.9 million in 1989, Deutz couldn't overcome American farmers' resistance. In 1990, Deutz gave up and sold the division in a management buyout, creating AXO Corporation. But damage had been done. Between 1985 and 2000, Gleaner lost significant market share to manufacturers with broader dealer bases and complete product lines. The Gleaner brand never died. AGCO still produces Gleaner combines today, but it went from being a dominant force in the combine market to a niche product. The combines themselves were great machines. The failure was in the corporate ownership changes and marketing missteps that destroyed farmer confidence. Number 8. Massey Ferguson 5650 Conventional Combine. In 1989, Massey Ferguson introduced the 5650 conventional combine in North America to replace the 550 model. It should have been a straightforward product refresh. Instead, it was a disaster. The 5650 was not well received, not by farmers and not even by the dealer network. Workmanship was reportedly poor. It didn't have a turret-style unloading auger like farmers expected. The build quality was substandard compared to previous Massey Ferguson combines. The rejection was so complete that MF stopped bringing them to North America after just 1 year, likely by 1990. The 5650 continued production in South America where standards and expectations were different, but it had failed catastrophically in the North American market. Massey later updated the design with the 5650 Advance for South American markets, which added 2 rotors behind the cylinder similar to class designs. They eventually introduced the 5690 and 6690 with center-mounted cabs and new styling. But in North America, the 5650 is remembered only as an embarrassing failure that lasted a single year. This failure came during a difficult period for Massey Ferguson. Financial troubles plagued the company throughout the late 1980s. The 5650 debacle was just one more black mark during a decade, when Massey was struggling to survive. It demonstrated how even established brands with loyal customers can produce machines so flawed that they're rejected immediately. Number 9. Big Bud 747. Okay, this one requires an asterisk because the Big Bud 747 didn't really fail in the traditional sense. It's the world's largest farm tractor, was incredibly capable, and actually worked successfully for decades. But it ultimately failed as a sustainable agricultural solution. Built in 1977 in Havre, Montana by Northern Manufacturing Company, the Big Bud 747, named after the Boeing 747, cost $300,000. It featured a 16-cylinder Detroit diesel V92T engine producing 1,100 horsepower. Fully ballasted, it weighed 135,000 pounds. It stood 14 feet tall, measured 27 feet long, and was 25 feet wide. The Rossi brothers used it for deep ripping on their 20,000-acre California cotton farm for 11 years. It then went to Willowbrook Farms in Florida for more deep ripping work. Eventually, it returned to Montana to work on the Williams brothers' farm. So what failed? Sustainability. The Big Bud 747 was custom-built. When the United Tire Company of Canada went bankrupt in 2000, finding replacement tires became impossible. The original 8-foot-tall tires were irreplaceable. It took until July 2020 to find a solution. Goodyear LSW 1430 R46 tires that were slightly under 7 feet tall, requiring custom rims. Every component was unique. Every part had to be custom-made or extensively modified. Maintenance became increasingly difficult. In 2009, the decision was made to retire the Big Bud 747 from regular farm work and move it to museums. The Big Bud 747 proved that you can build the world's largest tractor, but you can't sustain it without a supply chain. It was an engineering triumph that became a museum piece because the practical realities of parts availability made continued operation impossible. Today, it's worth 3 to 6 times its original cost as an exhibition piece, but it failed in its ultimate purpose, being a working farm tractor that could be maintained long-term. Number 10. International Harvester Farmall 560. In the late 1950s, International Harvester released the Farmall 560 as part of their 60 series tractors. With 60 horsepower and modern styling, it should have been a hit, and initially it was. Then the final drive started failing, catastrophically. The 560's final drive couldn't handle the power and loads farmers were putting on it. Tractors were breaking down in the field during critical planting and harvest seasons. Repairs were expensive and time-consuming. Farmers who had been loyal to IH for generations started looking at John Deere, Allis-Chalmers, and Case. IH dealers complained bitterly that more testing should have been done on farms before release. The 560's problems weren't isolated. Similar issues affected the 460 and other models in the same series. But the 560's higher power meant its failures were more dramatic and more costly. The final drive failures of the 560 became legendary in the industry. Even decades later, when discussing what went wrong with International Harvester, people specifically mentioned the 560. They often complained about too many infield failures, one historical account noted, such as the final drive failure in the Farmall 560. Dealers often said back then that more testing should have been done on the farms. Some customers were lost permanently after they had suffered downtime from these mistakes. IH eventually fixed the problems in later models, but the damage was done. Farmers who'd been stranded at critical times during the farming season didn't forget. The 560's failures contributed to International Harvester's declining market share in the 1960s and 1970s, eventually leading to the company's collapse and sale to Tenneco in 1984. The Farmall 560 was a good tractor with fatal flaws in a critical component. It proved that in farming, reliability isn't just a feature, it's everything. A tractor that breaks down during planting season can cost a farmer their entire year's income. The 560's final drive failures broke farmer trust, and trust once lost is almost impossible to regain. These 10 machines represent billions of dollars in development costs, countless hours of engineering innovation, and the hopes of manufacturers who believed they were building the future of farming. Some failed because of poor execution, some because of bad timing, others because they were too innovative for their own good or not innovative enough. What's remarkable is that many of these failures contain genuinely good ideas. The John Deere 8010's articulated four-wheel drive design eventually became the standard for large tractors. New Holland's twin-rotor concept, despite the TR70's problems, led to successful combines. Even the fast hitch's quick-attach principle influenced later implement attachment systems. The agricultural equipment industry is unforgiving. Farmers can't afford downtime during critical seasons. A tractor that fails during planting can destroy an entire year's income. A combine that breaks down during harvest can leave crops rotting in the field. These aren't consumer products that you can exchange at a store. They're massive capital investments that must work flawlessly when needed most. These failures taught the industry crucial lessons about testing, quality control, parts availability, and the importance of industry standards. They demonstrated that being first to market means nothing if your product isn't reliable. They proved that even the best engineering can fail if the business strategy is wrong. Today's modern farm equipment benefits from these expensive lessons. When you see a massive John Deere 9RX or a Case IH Quadtrac working a field, remember that their reliability was built on the failures of machines like the 8010. When you watch a modern rotary combine cleanly harvesting soybeans, remember the TR70's teething problems that led to better designs. These machines failed, but their failures paved the way for the remarkably reliable equipment farmers depend on today. In that sense, maybe they weren't failures after all. They were expensive but necessary steps on the path to progress.